Thank you so much. I can see that the room is now open and people are joining. Let's give those people who are joining a few minutes to get in. Yeah, I'm waiting for the 12 people in the waiting room to get in so that we can all start. But I'm very, very happy to see that we are all keeping time and the class is filling up slowly. Okay. Great. I can see we are all in. A few or three of us are still in waiting room, but I want to greet everyone. Hello. Thank you so much for joining us today. Welcome to our today's session of iCow Soil Advocacy Program. We are excited to have you join us today. I want to acknowledge people joining us via YouTube Live and also as on Zoom. I'm very happy to be with you today as a dedicated soil advocates. Whenever we have a chance to or an opportunity to learn something new, we can't miss that because it will help us in improving our soil's health. I'd like to take this moment to thank also our technical team for ensuring that our session runs smoothly. Yeah, the efforts behind the scene is really remarkable, and I always appreciate them. Today, we are honored to have a special guest with us, and it is going to be an exciting event. I want to let everyone that please feel free to engage actively, whether you are attending on Zoom or you are on YouTube. Kindly post your questions or reactions on the chat session. Let us use our chat there to even put down a comment. And if at all you have a question that you want to verbally ask, please put up your hand. Use the reactions button there and put up your hand so that you can be given an opportunity to talk. And please, whenever you are given that opportunity, please turn on your camera so that we can engage face to face. If you are unable to turn on your camera, you might not be able to participate, and we'll move on to the next person. So please ensure you put on your camera whenever you are given an opportunity to contribute. I want now to take this opportunity to invite Sue, who will take over and introduce our guest. And Sue joins us. Let us give a big round of applause as she joins. Let's go to the reactions button there and clap for Sue as she joins. Thank you very much. Sue, over to you.
Hello, 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 everyone. Nice to see everybody here, and welcome to today's iCow Soil Advocacy session. It's really good to see you. Today's very special, and that it's the second last lesson for the students in the September cohort of the iCow Soil Advocacy class, and an open session for the iCow community. So kind of like an open day at school. So once again, welcome to you all. I'm just going to remind us that over the past few weeks, we've come a really long way, and we've had only 2 sessions left. So you guys, you're nearly done with me, okay? We've learned about the beginning of soils through a journey that started 3.5 billion years ago with the advent of single-celled organisms, prokaryotes, then eukaryotes 1.6 billion years ago. The alliances and mutualistic relationships between these organisms, our algae, our lichens, and our fungi, and the microworld that built our soils 500,000 years ago. We zoomed in to contextualize the state of our soils today in Kenya and learned that over 72% of our arable soils are acidic. Our soils are dying, and we are largely the cause. And this is not unique to Kenya. Not surprisingly, food and nutrition security and health in general across every spectrum, soil, plants, insects, animals, and humans, is failing globally. You've been introduced to the works of some of the greats in the regenerative space who've been diligently and deliberately changing the narrative to fix this problem from the ground up, putting soils center stage of planetary health. We started with a beautifully narrated movie, The Soil Story, by the team at Kiss the Ground, followed by Dr. Elaine Ingham, where we learned about our buddies and the soil food web, the bacteria, the fungi, the protozoa, the nematodes, the micro and the macroarthropods. We even got to see them through my microscope on our exciting compost and soil safaris. And some of you even went on a microbe safari in Manchester last class too. In Dr. Christine Jones' How to Build Topsoil, we learned of the fundamental differences between the decomposition pathway and the liquid carbon pathway. And then we went deeper. Dr. James White and his students showed us how plants farm the soil microbes in their rhizosphere in what we now know is a process called rhizophagy. Some of you have done your practical homework, starting with your soil integrity test, which showed you firsthand how you are impacting the soil you work with. You also pulled up plants and inspected their rhizospheres to see if they were communicating with their soil microbes, to see if the glues were there. And finally, you've learned a great method of how to make biocomplete compost, the soil food web way, to grow beneficial soil microbes to inoculate and stimulate your plants and soils to regenerate life. And whilst making your piles, you're spreading your wings as iCow soil advocates and teaching family, friends, and the communities you engage with. It's such a pleasure to witness these events and our videos shared on WhatsApp. Keep them coming. So what else is there to learn, right? And there's still a bunch. We're lucky to have one of the world's greats in the regenerative space here with us today to teach us something that we haven't covered. He's not only a passionate soil advocate like ourselves, but also a passionate advocate for increasing quality in the food supply. Dan Kittredge is the founder and executive director of the Bionutrient Food Association, BFA. Many of you were lucky to attend his conference this May, and we thank him for his kind generosity in accommodating us straight away when we asked to attend. Known as one of the leading proponents of nutrient density, Dan works to demonstrate the connections between soil health, plant health, and human health. As a regenerative organic farmer for more than 30 years, a man of true grit, for real, Dan is here to share his insights on soil minerals, a critical component of regenerative agriculture, often confused with conventional synthetic fertilizers. So I invite you all to give Dan a huge emoji welcome as he joins us today. So welcome, Dan.
Thank you, Sue. Honored to be here. Thank you for having me.
Great. So where are you, Dan?
I am in Paris at the moment.
You're in Paris.
Yeah.
Yeah. And you're sweating because you were like going through all your train stops trying to get into the room to get into this room, right?
I had some meetings and I made the mistake of stopping to see the Eiffel Tower, and that yeah, I made it a little bit close, but I made it in time. I think I've stopped sweating now, but yeah.
But it was like Eiffel Tower webinar.
No, I was gonna make it here, but I'm like, this is my third time in Paris, and I've never bothered to actually stop and see the Eiffel Tower. I might as well. Like, here's my meeting, there's my hotel. I might as well just stop for a minute. And yeah, I made
Well,
it. We're here. That's it.
well done. You made it.
Yeah.
Great. It's really fantastic to have you, and we're totally honored. And for today's session, as we know we're going to be focusing on minerals, before we start, what I would like you to do is actually just to tell us a little bit about yourself. You know, how did you get into this space? What have you done? What are your passions? What drives you?
How many minutes do you want me to do that in? 5? Oh, I can cover a lot in 5. Okay.
As long as you
Uh,
need. I'll
no,
jump in if you
I don't
want.
want to spend too much time about myself. I grew up on a small homestead subsistence farm, organic farm in the 1980s, before organic was a word that meant a certain kind of agriculture. And yeah, we were milking our cow by hand and putting away our food for the winter and not buying much. It was I mean, obviously I'm American and I'm white and I have a lot of privilege, but I think it was one of those situations where feel like I have a lot of context from personal experience about subsistence farmers around the world. Um, and so, yeah, my parents ran an organic farming organization, helped write some of the first organic standards in the US, and I've never really stopped being a farmer. When I got married and I wanted to raise my children on the land and had no other skills, I came to terms with the fact that I was not very good at making a living. I had lots of pests and lots of diseases, and that made it hard for me to have enough crops to sell to pay the bills. And so I started researching. This is almost 20 years ago now. I started researching, maybe there's more to it than just not using chemicals. And I started reading books and going to conferences and attending seminars. And as I learned things and began shifting my practices, I actually fairly rapidly got to a point where pests were gone and diseases were gone and yields were high, and I was able to make a living working part-time on the farm. And so that started me on the process of wanting to share with others what I had come across, because I don't know, I just felt like if I grew up on an organic farm, my parents ran an organic farming organization, and I didn't know these things. I hadn't known these things. Maybe others didn't also. And so I started giving workshops, and that turned into courses, and that turned into an organization. And founded in 2010 the Bionutrient Food Association as an NGO whose purpose is to increase quality in the food supply, broadly focusing on the nutritional value of food, which we think connects to soil health, ecosystem function, farm viability, flavor, aroma, pest and disease resistance, human health, even potentially, greater coherence and consciousness in our beings. So yeah, it's been a wonderful ride for the last 15 years. And our initial work was really just doing courses, workshops, and then courses. And we set up an annual conference, local chapters. And then in 2017 began doing research that looked into the scale of nutrient variation in food and what caused it, and building instruments to test it. And so, yeah, I think for a number of years there, I was sort of more well known for the workshops and courses and conference that I've been doing. And for the last few years, I think more well known for the handheld spectrometer and the topic of nutrient density and the research we're doing. So I'm currently on a European speaking tour. I was in France for a few days, and then I was in Italy for a few days, and now I'm in France again, and then Sweden tomorrow, and then Netherlands for 2 days, and then Ireland for a few days, and then Portugal. And yeah, actively doing the courses and the education and conferences still, but also working on the research. So it looks like potentially you're going to have me down there to Kenya in end of March, beginning of April. I'm very
Exactly.
excited to go back to Africa and actually do some real I've only been to Africa once, and it was more of like at a big city in a big conference center. It wasn't actually on the ground.
Well, we're
Yeah.
super excited about that.
Yeah, totally.
That's really cool. So now a lot of your work is actually going out and doing advocacy stuff.
Well, I think I'm still doing a lot of education, courses and workshops and speaking. I mean, I'm not sure if you call keynoting conferences advocacy or education, but um,
Yeah, okay. We call it advocacy. I call it advocacy.
I think it was education, but whatever. It doesn't really matter what you call it.
Okay,
Yeah, I'm busy. I'm busy doing all kinds of things. Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
perfect, perfect. So we've got a nice group. Hello to everybody there who's on YouTube. There are 20 people over there on YouTube. If you have any questions, please do put them in the chat and we will bring them to Dan. So as James explained to everybody, this is going to be a bit of an interactive session. If you have any questions for Dan, do put them in the chat and we'll be looking at the questions all the time. We'll be looking at the chat. And then every so often we'll stop and we'll let you engage with him directly if you put your hand up. And if you do that and we give you the opportunity to put your microphone and your camera on, you need to do it quickly or you're going to get skipped over just in the interest of time. So our topic today is minerals. And I'm going to start blasting questions at Dan that have been in my mind around the issue around minerals. And you guys go ahead and put your questions in there. So Dan, can you explain the role of minerals in soil health and why they are essential for regenerative agriculture and the difference between the minerals and synthetic fertilizers?
Absolutely. Yeah. Well, I think what's critically important to understand is that minerals are necessary for life. If you understand, I mean, I'm not sure what you call screwdrivers and sockets and wrenches. Do you call them spanners in Africa, or do you call them wrenches and sockets? Do you know what those little tools that are used to tighten nuts and on the bolts and
Yeah, yeah, whatever it is you're calling them, we get it.
screwdrivers, sockets, wrenches, spanners.
Yes.
If you're building something, if you're taking apart, taking a muffler off of a car or tightening a bolt, whatever those little pieces of metal that have a certain shape that get used over and over again to put things together and take things apart. If you understand that concept in sort of metal human built things, that's what would be an enzyme in a biological system. And enzymes are used to build carbohydrates, to digest proteins. They're used in life over and over again to build things and take things apart. Part of how our bodies are built, part of how plants' bodies are built, part of how we basically function requires these things called enzymes. And at the center of every enzyme is an element, whether that's a copper or a zinc or a calcium or a potassium or a manganese or molybdenum or boron or cobalt or sulfur. There's, I think, 25 different elements that are required for every one of your strands of DNA to be built. I like to think about, I mean, if you are familiar with the soil food web and the critical role of microorganisms, understand that 80% of the species of life in the soil, all those bacteria and fungi, require a compound called B12 to exist. And B12 has at its center this element called cobalt. So if you don't have enough cobalt in your soil, you don't have enough B12, and then the microbes can't live. They literally can't exist. So it's critical for soil life for these minerals to be there. And if you are living in a tropical zone, like where I think most people in Central Africa are, where you haven't had glaciers for a while, the soil types, they're called laterite soils. They're weathered, they're worn. That low pH is effectively a dynamic where you have a low level of minerals in your soil. And what that means is it's very difficult for life to function. There's just not enough of these basic raw ingredients for system function to occur. When I am giving my courses and explaining this, I talk about the ways that soil remineralization can occur on scale. And I'm thinking about Africa, I'm thinking about India. I spent a lot of time in India, in villages in India, with people who didn't have a lot of money and lived very close to the edge. And how can we think about systemically remineralizing our land? It's not through buying things in bags. Actually, the parent material, the parent rock. So I say between rock dust and sea salt and seawater, we have all the naturally occurring minerals we need to remineralize our lands, which in many cases is one of the key limiting factors in life really functioning profoundly. As a farmer myself, as I was beginning to learn about these things, I started by going to a quarry where they were making granite countertops. They were cutting out pieces of rock from the mountainside, and with the blade of the saw that was cutting the slices of rock, that was causing this little dust to be a waste product. And I picked that up and put it in bags and brought it back to the farm and spread it on the land, and I saw my crops achieve a level of vigor I'd never seen before. If you think about what in the Nile River Valley, in Egypt, the floods that would come down every spring would, they're taking the crushed rock from the mountains in Ethiopia and they're dropping this silt onto the land. If we think about historically when agriculture is being practiced, whether it's the Nile River Valley or the Tigris and Euphrates, or the Indus and the Ganges, or the Yellow and the Yangtze, wherever you have these long-standing historical agricultural civilizations, it's in many cases in these river valleys. And that's because when you're harvesting crops from the land and you're engaging in plowing and tillage, you're effectively wearing out the land. And so if you don't have a process of remineralization, eventually that land will desertify. It'll wear out and things won't grow well. And so all we're doing is taking that raw material that nature would otherwise do in her own scale, and actively applying it. So there's, again, dozens of different elements that are required for life to function. In many cases, we have very low levels of these in our soils, and they are a limiting factor. It's a topic that not many people discuss because rock dust and seawater are present in very large quantities on this planet, which means they're very inexpensive, which means no one can make much money selling them, which means no one has any reason to tell you about them. So it's one of those things where, what you need, nature provides in massive quantities. But if you don't know that these things are right there and you don't access them, then you'll struggle and you'll be sold products that you don't need by people who are trying to make money off of you, and it becomes a whole different conversation. So these rock minerals, finely ground rock dust and things like sea salt, is what I'm talking about with remineralization, which is entirely different than fertilizer. So fertilizer is a word that generally is legally controlled by the government. So if this thing is called a fertilizer, it has to have soluble nutrients. So when we talk about nitrogen and potassium and phosphorus, and you see a number on a bag, a 10-10-10 or a 0-52-0 or a 5-3-4, if there's ever a number on a bag, that's referring to a soluble nutrient. And to explain this, I use the metaphor of an IV drip. If you are in a car accident and you're in a coma and you're in the hospital, they'll take a bag of salt water, basically liquid minerals in solution, and they'll put a tube and they'll inject it directly into your bloodstream, and you can be kept alive for months with this soluble nutrient injected directly into your bloodstream. So that basically is what fertilizer is. Fertilizer is soluble nutrients. And so, yes, you can cause plants to grow by adding soluble nutrients to the soil, but plants did not evolve to eat soluble nutrients, just like you did not evolve to eat soluble nutrients. You evolved to eat food that was digested by your microbes, by your gut flora. Plants evolved to eat food that was digested by their gut flora, right? So, yeah, I can stop there. Looks like you wanted to say something.
Yeah, so I wanted to say, so basically, the soluble nutrients, the soluble minerals, the soluble nutrients, when we're saying we're using rock dust, they're not soluble. So
Correct.
something has got to solubilize them, and that's the soil microbes.
So what happens is the plant makes the sugar in its leaves, and as you know, if you know about James White's work and rhizophagy, then you understand that the plants are then taking in microbes, digesting part of them, emitting them out of their roots, and basically those microbes have the ability to raise and lower pH, to digest those minerals out of the rock, and then turn them into an organic format. And then the plant sucks those microbes in and it digests part of the microbes, which has the minerals that came from the soil. And then it spits them out again and they go out and digest some more. And it's this beautiful, amazing thing, which is cycling as nature needs it. It's not salt water that'll leach. It's rocks that are digested and turned into an organic format. It's brilliant. It's completely brilliant and effectively free.
Yeah, it's amazing. So I have a question for you, because the idea that you went out and you went and got rock dust and you put it on your farm and you sorted it. So I know that my students are going, is that all I need to do? I just need to go out and find rock dust? Which rock dust? Where rock dust?
Yeah.
So there's a question from Ahmed Dirir, and he has said, we have calci soils originating from calcium carbonate or limestone rocks. The farm has been, the farm is deep, silty loam soil with a high pH. My question is that nearby we have a limestone quarry with lots of dust. Would the limestone dust be of any use?
No.
Okay.
No. Yes. Very good. Very, very, very important question. So what we're looking for, I generally say there's two sort of categories of rock you're looking for, and those are either basalt or granite. A limestone is basically calcium and maybe some magnesium and carbon and oxygen. That is not providing the spectrum of 30 or 40 or 50 or 60 different elements in the parent rock. So very specifically, it is granite or basalt, which oftentimes is dug up in quarries and used to make roads and other kind of basic things in civilization. If you are in a calciferous subsoil area, you might need to go a long way to get some. Where I live, we have a granite subsoil, and you can get that waste product from the quarry for $2 a ton or $5 a ton. But yeah, not so sandstone won't work. Limestone won't work. It has to be a type of rock that has a broad spectrum of elements in it. That's a very, very, very good question.
When you're talking about basalt, and that's the kind of rock that we build our roads with. So we've got a lot of road construction, for example, in Kenya, and they're going into the hillsides and carving out this really hard rock and then chipping it down into little bits. We call it, like, the Swahili word is kokoto, and then this is mixed in there with the tarmac and then
Precisely.
Is
Yeah.
that the...
Exactly. So generally in the quarry, they'll get the chunks of rock out and they'll have a crusher and they'll crush it down to a certain particle size. And there's a waste product, which is the dust.
Yeah.
It's the waste product, which is the dust that you're looking for. The more finely ground, the better. Yeah.
What if you got some of that stuff yourself? Because you can buy it, everybody, because we use that and it's available on the roadside in piles for all of our construction. You can always go out and buy some of this stuff. It's mixed in concrete to make certain things, etc. It's available all over the country. What if you went out and just smashed some up?
It would take a lot of work to get it down to the fine particle size. What you basically want to do is as little effort as possible, as little expense as possible, as small a particle size as possible, as inexpensive as possible. So yeah, and I'm talking about tons per acre, right? 2 tons, 5 tons, 10 tons. You guys do hectares or acres?
Both.
Both. So double it for hectares. So tons per acre is an application rate. Experiment, of course. Don't take my word for anything. Experiment. It will become more bioavailable if you put it into a compost pile. If you're making compost, you can do 5 to 10% of the weight of that compost pile can be rock dust, and that the compost pile will basically help to pre-digest the rock minerals. So that would be one way to start. But really you're looking, because your soils are highly weathered, you haven't had glaciers come through there in many, many million years. You have a really serious need for this base remineralization to occur, I would suggest.
So how often would you need to remineralize your soil?
If you do a heavy dose once every 100 years,
So it's a one-off.
it's a one-off.
Wow.
You
Wow.
systemically remineralize,
Okay,
and then those minerals are there, and then, you know, your grandchildren can thank you for it.
so
Yeah.
basically I can just see my entire class tomorrow are out there in the quarries.
It depends on how much land you have, but yeah, if it's a waste product from industry, and this is an amazing, amazing material, which in many cases is almost free. The biggest hassle is driving it from where the hole in the ground is to your land.
Yeah, yeah. Well, actually, considering that a lot of it is bought and piled on the side of the road, underneath those piles is a bunch of dust too. Okay,
Go
not
shovel
in
it
the
up.
quantity you might need.
Yeah,
Yeah, not in the quantities you might need, but if you're
start,
if you're
start,
small scale and if you're
start.
places, yeah.
Yeah.
So talk to me about sea salt, because sea salt we have a lot of. Our salt that comes onto the market as the salt that we eat is sea
Yeah.
salt. It comes from our coast.
Sea salt or rock salt, depending on if it's mined, you know, is just rock salt is ancient sea salt. I know in India, you know, the least expensive salt for people to eat is this chunky stuff that is mined out of the ground. And again, it's got 90 different elements in it, 92. The thing on the planet with the broadest spectrum of elements in it is sea salt. And the oceans are full of seawater, so there's no shortage of sea salt on this planet. It's just a question of how much it costs. I generally, and again, application rates are much, 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 much less for sea salt. So we're looking at something on the order of 75 pounds per acre, which would be 75 kilograms per hectare. And I generally recommend that, you know, in any area where it rains at least 15 or 20 inches of rain a year. So if you have an issue with saline soils, and high salt content, high conductivity, maybe this is an issue. In that case, I would teach you to remove the sodium and chloride from the sea salt. So that's quite simple as well. You can take seawater and you can, just by using lye, you can remove the sodium chloride and just harvest the trace elements. It's really the 90 trace elements that you're looking for.
How do you get the sodium out of the seawater?
The sodium chloride, which is 96% of the salt in sea salt, it's the 4% is the other trace elements. So basically, I would say if you're going to go to the ocean and harvest seawater, I would say you take a barrel, maybe it's a 200-liter barrel, and you would bring it to put it in the sand above the high tide line, and you would take a 20-liter bucket, a 5-gallon bucket, and you go to the ocean and you fill up your barrel with the seawater. And then you need lye, which is either sodium hydroxide or potassium hydroxide. You can make lye out of wood ash and rainwater. So you can make that for free also if you've got ashes. You can buy lye usually fairly readily. And you would add the lye. You have to use a plastic barrel. You can't use a metal barrel. And you have to use a wooden stick. You can't use a metal anything because the lye will corrode the metal. But you have a plastic barrel and a metal stick or a wooden stick. And you want to add the lye to the seawater, keep pouring it in, stirring it in. And you want to check the pH of that water. When the pH rises to 10.4, you stop, add in the lye, and then you wait 24 hours.
Okay.
And then at the end of that 24-hour period, you basically can pour the water slowly off the top. So basically, instead of the cream rising to the top like it does for milk, the cream will fall to the bottom in this case. So there'll be a layer of milky colored fluid at the bottom of your barrel. That's the water with the trace elements in it. And the top, the vast majority of the water will be clear. So you basically just pour off that clear water, leaving a little bit on the bottom that's milky. And that basically is a trace element concentrate, which is absolute rocket fuel. You can apply that, a pint per acre as part of a foliar spray, or a quart or a half gallon per acre as part of watering into the soil. 10 gallons per acre per year would be a massively high dose of this.
Yeah,
It just does magical things, magical things. But
that's
again,
true.
completely naturally occurring, prevalent in massive quantities. You can make it yourself. Anybody who tries to make it and market it, people will figure out how valuable it is and they'll go make it themselves, which is why you never heard about it, right? Very exciting to me.
Super cool. So
Very
could
powerful.
you do it from crystalline salt that you have, or is that
Yep.
already?
Yep.
So I could take. So I mean, salt is so cheap. The other day, I
Yeah.
ordered online a packet of salt, and it was
Yeah.
like $1/2. No, it
Yeah.
was less than $1/2. And I thought that I was going to get a little bag like this, and I ended up getting like 1 kilo of salt.
Yep.
And I thought, what am I going to do with all of this for the rest of my life? I'm never going to eat this amount of salt. So you're saying, and this is sea salt. Our salt on the Kenyan market is sea salt. It's directly harvested
Yep.
from the sea. Some of it does have some, what is it that they add? Iodine, but some of it is just sea salt. So I could take that sea salt and do what you're saying.
Right. Make sure if iodine has been added, sometimes they've taken the trace elements out.
Okay.
You need to make sure it's the raw salt, not the processed salt.
Okay.
I mean, you know how the government is. They take the nutrients out so you can be less healthy, so you can need more pharmaceuticals. You do not want pure iodized sea salt. You want raw sea salt.
Okay.
If they've added iodine, that's great, but make sure it hasn't had the good stuff taken out. Yeah, I mean, like I said, the easiest thing to do is just to take that raw salt. You want it in a fairly small particle size, and I just spread it out across the land
Yeah.
before the rainy season. Yep,
Yeah.
before the rainy season, just spread it out there.
Some of the stuff that we do have in abundance as well, because we've got soda lakes. So the
Yep.
soda lakes are still up as well. Are any of the minerals and nutrients that are coming up with those lakes useful for mineralizing our soils?
I don't know. I'd have to know the specifics. I couldn't say for sure.
Okay, I'll get some information and I'll send it to you, and then you can feedback to me.
You'd have to assess it or look it up. Yeah. If you've got saline, I mean, in some cases, in areas where it's quite dry and doesn't rain very much, then you have, this sort of an issue with too much salt in the soil already. It's high conductivity. In those areas, you would want to be making sure to remove the sodium chloride and just using the trace elements. It's the trace elements you're looking for. If it rains enough, the sodium chloride will be leached out. You don't need to worry about it. If it doesn't rain enough, you have to be concerned about that. Yeah.
So I've seen a lot of questions are saying, and this is really exciting to a lot of people. Can we use Magadi now? Guys, I've just talked about that. So Magadi is the same stuff that we're getting from Lake Elementaita, Lake Magadi, all of our soda lakes. Dan isn't sure about that, but I'll get information to him and feed it back to you. For some of the questions about how this is exactly done, let's do this. Now that we've heard it's here and Dan has been recorded, we can go back to our YouTube and we can all take notes and get the facts directly. Otherwise, we'll go over and over this same point again, and we've got quite a lot that we want to cover. So, but the good news is that we can mineralize our soils without very much
with naturally occurring, very inexpensive raw materials. And when you have worn and weathered soils, this is a critical piece that has to be done to bring vitality back to the system. Yeah, but you don't need to buy stuff.
Yeah. Hosea, you've just said you'd like to do this with Bogoria water. Bogoria is soda ash, so let's wait on that. Dan has mentioned sea salt. Sea salt is very different to our soda lake waters, so we'll come back to you on that. So don't go ahead and do that.
Yeah.
Let's think about doing it with the seawater for now. Okay, caveat there: no soda ash. You're not allowed. If you do that, you'll be thrown out of class. You won't get.
Or experiment in one small corner and see what happens. What I say is, you never know. But if you're a good farmer, you'll find a corner and experiment. Try a little bit here, try a lot there, see what happens, and tell everybody else.
Exactly.
I'm only sharing what I know, but yeah, for everyone, what you really need to do is start exploring, but don't put a lot on everywhere and say I told you to.
Ahmed Didir, who says, "I'm off to the beach." He's going to be
it's a farm responsibility. You are obliged to go stay at the ocean for 24 hours to harvest sea mineral concentrate. It's a job. You're not taking a vacation. This is a farm task. Yeah. Yeah.
Exactly. Tell the family that. Tell your boss that. I'm going to the
Bring the
beach.
family. We got a farm work trip to go on. Yeah, that's what I'm gonna call it. Yeah, exactly.
Perfect. So, my second question to you. So, what are some of the common mineral deficiencies in soils that farmers should be aware of?
I would say it, of course, depends entirely on your soil, your parent rock material, what your subsoil is made up of, and the climate dynamics, and how the land has been treated over the past 50, 500, 5,000, 500,000 years. So all land is unique. Every piece of land has its own personality and its own life story. Not, all humans are not uniform and have the same imbalances. All land is not uniform and has the same imbalances. So that being said, there's a couple things that I don't think I've ever seen land that has enough boron. Boron is what's called an anion, and it tends to leach out of the soil. I mean, there may be some spots in the world where there's enough boron. I don't know where they are. They'd be likely to be in a spot where it doesn't rain very much, but yeah. So molybdenum is key. I mean, there's a bunch of trace elements that I generally focus on. Sulfur in many cases is deficient. Boron is oftentimes deficient. Molybdenum, the cobalt, the manganese. Some places have enough manganese, copper, and zinc. What you really want to be doing if you're focusing on unique elements is taking a soil test. And the problem with the sort of the conventional university soil tests is that they are coming from the perspective of the fertilizer industry. And so you can't take a soil test and send it to the normal lab and have it operate from this biological perspective. You need to take your soil and send it to a biological lab. And again, this is an area where I just cannot speak to what the dynamics are in Africa. I will generally recommend a lab which follows what's called an Albrecht style protocol. A Malick-3 analysis is generally what's done. There's a long conversation there in nuance fashion, which I'm hoping if we can do a course in Kenya in March, I'll be able to walk people through in detail. I have taught my 2-day course many times around the world, and it is completely free on YouTube for anybody who wants to watch it. You just need to go look up Dan Kittredge on YouTube and look for something that says part 1 through 9. And I go in some depth on that, on how to read a soil test, what specific ones you're looking for, how to determine how much you need.
So Dan, you went through that really, really, really quickly. And this is an extremely important piece of information especially for the class. You guys, we've got 2 sessions left, and then you're going to join Dan's class, because Dan has got a free class online on his website, on the Bionutrient Association website. It's a 2-day course, but you can take it in a little bit longer time if you want. There's it would be 2 days, full days. All of the sessions,
12 hours of content. Yeah.
6 videos of 2 hours each. And in there is exactly what he's saying, but in more detail. So he shows you how to read your soil analysis from any lab that it's going to, and then how to, by reading that, look at the natural materials and re-mineralize your soils based on what that analysis is telling you is lacking. So hugely important. And I do implore you all to go there if you're not going there already, but stay in class now for the rest of today.
It'll be on YouTube for a while. Yes. So you don't need to worry about it going away. It is completely free. Yeah.
Loads of information there. So that was a great segue to your classes there. Wonderful. Let's see, what have we got? Another question. We've got some questions here that are quite interesting, Dan, because they go across that link of livestock and animals and things. Okay. So somebody said, it started with somebody saying, just to confirm, is the unprocessed sea salt the same as the rough rock salts we give cows? Now, if we're giving cows salt, it must be safe for them, right? Then somebody else said, what about natural salt licks in pasture land? So hang on a second. Natural salt licks in pasture land. Priscilla, you asked that. I want us to please, let's spotlight Priscilla and bring her in and tell us, what does that mean? What are these natural salt licks and who goes to them and who is licking them? Because those are minerals that are in the land that are being consumed by something that needs minerals in its body. So let's hear a little bit about that and see if we can make that connection to see if, yes, those are the same kinds of salts. Hi, Priscilla. Good to see you.
Good to see you too. Thank you very much. I grew up in a subsistence family, and we used to take our cows or goats to areas where there's salt in the land, already in the soil. And they leak salt for some time, and we are taking them back seasonally every time so I'm wondering whether that salt can be used to mineralize our soils in other areas where we don't have.
I would expect that is likely exactly this natural sea salt. And it's critically important. As I understand, I mean, at certain points in time, the caravans of camels were carrying salt across the desert in Africa, and it was worth more than its weight in gold. It is critically important for life to have this full spectrum of trace elements. And there are areas where it's naturally occurring and areas where it's deficient. So yes, that would be, yeah.
Animals are great indicators of what they're not getting in their nutrition and what they're seeking out. Especially, we've got caves that elephants are going in and gorging out salt out of the walls. We've got other animals that are digging up or going to certain salt pans. So again, just back to that whole mineralization.
Because these lands are so weathered and worn,
yeah,
and those basic minerals are not in the soil, and then they're not in the plants growing in the soil, and the animals need them to function.
Yeah, so
they are going to harvest them. So what we can do with our technology and with our science is we can take that understanding and we can spread 75 pounds per acre of sea salt across our land and work to systemically address that underlying issue. Yeah, instead of having to take our animals a long distance to go get the salt, if salt is so inexpensive, spread it on your land and your plants will grow more well. You'll have more food for the animals to eat. It'll be of better quality and it'll solve so many systemic problems. It's really quite exciting, the implications.
But in some places where there is these salt leaks, we don't have, grass does not grow very well, and other plants that do not also grow very well. I was also wondering about the magadi.
Because there's too much. If you put salt in the soup, if you make soup and you don't put any salt, it doesn't have much flavor. If you put too much salt, you can't eat it.
Yeah.
If you put the right amount of salt, it makes the flavor amazing. So I'm very specific when I'm saying 75 pounds per acre.
Okay.
I'm very specific. That's a very specific number. And I would generally say on my farm, I do that every year. Every year, because I get enough rain that's not an issue. If you are very, very short in rain, then I mean, yeah.
So Dan, you said
longer conversation that we can cover entirely in an hour and a half, but
yeah,
hopefully this gives the context.
You said for mineralization with the rock dust, it's a once off, and then for the salts, it can be once a year. And I guess it depends on what you're growing and how much rain there is, etc., etc.
And again, experiment.
And your soil test.
We also have the magadi, the harvest from Magadi, Lake Magadi. I don't know if that's raw material.
Thank you for that, Priscilla. I've mentioned that, and there are, and I have said that Dan doesn't know what that is yet. And unfortunately, I don't have the chemical analysis of what a Magadi is right now. And if anybody does, please just throw it into the chat or into, if you've got it, or if you're somebody who's watching on YouTube has it. Hi to the YouTube people again. We do know you're there, by the way. So yeah, so then we could, if there's anybody who knows, then we can look at that. But we have got a lot of conversations going on in the chat about, let's see, somebody says, does this apply to African cows? Maasai's to be specific, because I feel like, So yeah, well, whatever that means, you know that it could be any African cow. Soil analysis
What I
results.
say is offer it to the animals and see if they want it. I mean,
Yeah.
nature should be your guide. It shouldn't be some American who's your guide. It should be your land and your animals. So what you should do is you should experiment. You should never trust anyone except for your land and your animals. And so this person has this idea, this person has that idea. You take it, you try it, and you see what happens in a small area. If it seems to work, do it in a larger area. If it really works, tell your friends and they can experiment. That's the way these things should be done.
Perfect.
Yeah.
A question here about seaweed. We have an organization processing organic fertilizer from seaweed. Could this be rich in minerals and therefore of superior quality?
Seaweed is a wonderful, wonderful thing, but again, how much does it cost? It's never gonna, I mean, if you're looking for trace elements, the least expensive way to get trace elements is this rock dust and sea salt. If you're harvesting and processing and selling, it's going to be way more expensive. It may be good business for you, but it's not going to be the best return for investment for the farmer.
And I guess, Dan, just to put that in context, when we look at seaweed or kelp that's available in the market, it's a crazy thing. We've got an ocean 400 kilometers away from Nairobi, 1,000 kilometers away from the furthest point in Kenya, yet the kelp that's on the market, most of it ends up coming from the Asian countries or from the US. It's completely crazy. And that's why the price is so high, because there isn't because actually it's because the regenerative space and the organic space have not demanded in sufficient quantities enough of these products for them to be being made locally. So I think that needs to start changing, because we have our own seaweed. We've got plenty of seaweed, and it should come.
If the seaweed comes in on the shore and is in piles after the storms, this is one of the most valuable materials you can use for mulching or for making compost. It's an amazing, amazing, amazing material.
Okay, I can see half of the class have sent half of their family up to get the rocks and the other half to get seaweed. The seaweed washes up on our beaches, so much so it is such a bother that people are raking it and burying it and trying to get rid of it. Some people end up burning it.
That's ridiculous.
Is seagrass and seaweed the same thing?
Oh, it's all wonderful. It's all wonderful. The issue is just transporting it inland. So what you would want to do is you want to lay it out and let it dry so it's as light as possible. And then you'd want to pack it and bale it and put it on a big truck, really tall. And that is an amazing material. Absolutely amazing material. Wonderful stuff.
So
wonderful
all of you, Somaliland, all of you guys all over South Africa. I know South Africa is selling seaweed. In fact, somebody approached me and said, can we sell some of you our seaweed mix? Do you know anyone? And I'm thinking, what are we doing? We've got an ocean.
Go.
Doing dots. Perfect. Okay, guys. So we've got a lot of raw materials here that we are ignoring.
Use the things from nature that she gives in excess. That's all you should need. You shouldn't need to buy things. As a farmer, for anybody who's a farmer, the easiest way to make a living, I mean, the first thing to do is to spend as little money as possible. The more money you spend buying things, the more you have to sell. And if you can source things naturally and inexpensively, then that makes the amount of things you have to sell much less to make a living. So as a farmer, I never buy anything new. I almost never, It's first thing is to spend as little money as possible.
Exactly.
Work with
here's
nature.
another question. We have widespread potassium deficiency in our area and typically quite acidic. This tends to fix potassium, making it unavailable. Would the sea mineral extract respond to this?
The potassium is going to be in high levels in your rock dust. Any of your basalts and
phosphorus. Sorry, he's saying phosphorus. White says phosphorus. Sorry.
Okay, phosphorus.
We have a phosphorus deficiency.
Phosphorus is going to be more likely in your animal manure than. So dung is going to be a good source. There is rock phosphate, which is the natural material I use.
Oh, okay, got it. Yeah.
So there's various kinds of rock that you can use.
Yeah.
And in Morocco, which is not quite close to Kenya, but there's massive, massive mines of rock phosphate.
Tanzania has also got Mijingu rock phosphate, which is available all over the East
So that
Africa region.
natural rock phosphate, that's the thing you want to use. And yeah, yep, as far underground as possible. Yep.
Okay. Here's another
Put
good
it
question.
into your compost pile. If you're making compost, put that rock phosphate into your compost pile. That'll make it more bioavailable. Yeah.
So basically, because of the microbes in the compost, they're making it more bioavailable. So any of your mineral amendments, you can put them in there to make it more of it bioavailable when they go out. So on that note, Wycliffe has said microbes are said to communicate with plants several kilometers away in search of useful minerals. I thought microbes could avail such minerals to plants.
So yeah, the bacteria, well, it's the fungi, the mycorrhizal, the fungal, structures will reach as far as they can reach. But if you've got a road or tillage or any kind of destruction of the soil of plants, then that's going to be the end of that. Wherever you till the soil, wherever the soil's bare, you don't have that functional thing happening. So only when the soil's covered, when it's alive, when it's not disturbed, should you, and for some time, should you expect that to begin to occur. But if the whole soil in your whole area is low in phosphorus, there's nowhere for them to bring it from to share it. So you're going to have an underlying issue. And rock phosphate is the naturally occurring material that would be used to systemically address that, shy of animal manure, if you've got animal manure available, which generally has good levels.
Perfect. Then somebody talks about diatomites. I'm going to tell you a funny story about diatomite. So diatomite is 60% silicates. Silicon oxide, SiO2.
SiO2, silicon oxide. Diatomaceous earth, you're talking about? Diatoms?
Exactly. Diatomaceous earth, exactly. Coming from the diatoms.
Okay.
So he has said here, it's used several ways, including livestock, also added to compost. So before you tell us what we could use it for, I'll tell you. So the government was doing a fertilizer subsidy program, and farmers were being given sacks of fertilizer at reduced prices that they could buy. And the company that was filling these bags of fertilizer had actually gone out to a diatomite mine. The fertilizer was supposed to have been shipped in from Russia. I'm really, I'm really happy that what happened because what farmers got were bags of diatomite and goat manure. So in a way, you were going to do a launch of some good stuff into the soils. It was like a great
place to start.
There was a public uproar, and people have been baying for the neck of the minister who was in the Minister of Agriculture at the time. I'm not quite sure how the story ended, but we do have a diatomite factory sitting in the middle of Kenya as well. So tell us what our uses would be for diatomite in Regen Ag.
Well, if it's silica, that's a really, really important mineral in the overall cycle of mineral availability. In my course, I talk about, which elements need to be present to facilitate the availability of which other elements, and nature has a sort of a pathway of bioavailability, which starts with boron, and then it goes to silica, and then it goes to calcium, and then it goes to everything else. And so if you don't have enough boron, the cycle can't begin. And in many cases, when you've got a weathered soil, the silica levels are low as well. So those are two really important elements to have present in sufficient levels. So if you've got any kind of, I thought diatomaceous earth was calcium. I thought there was a lot of calcium in it, but I may be wrong. Don't quote me on that. If you know it's silica, what happened when you put it under the land? Did the plants grow more well? Was there beneficial impacts that occurred?
So what's really cool is that, well, what we're seeing is we're not seeing people say our crops failed. I'm blaming the government for crop failures. So I think that people are maybe not realizing that although they didn't put any fertilizer in because we got garbage fertilizer, it didn't really do any damage and might in long term do some good.
It might be some good things. Some goat manure is not bad, and some nice rock dust would be amazing. But yeah, I think of diatomaceous earth. I don't, yeah, anyway.
I'm just Googling it really quickly. The content analysis of diatomite revealed that silicon oxide content exceeds 91%. So yeah, that's
Okay,
the bulk of it.
silicon.
I mean,
Okay.
and the other thing I looked at was like 20%.
All right.
So Magadi soda, which is something we were looking at, somebody has said it's sodium carbonate compound produced from a naturally occurring mineral. So sodium carbonate.
Sodium carbonate is not going to be a broad spectrum trace element.
Okay, guys. So don't use Magadi soda.
Or try it in one small spot and see what happens. But don't try it in a big area. But don't try it and say, I told you to, because it'll address this trace element deficiency. If it's sodium carbonate, that's sodium, carbon, and oxygen. That's not 92 elements.
You're going to laugh at this. Somebody has said we need to go swimming soon in Kwale. So Kwale is a coastal. And never come back without seaweed. Can you imagine filling your suitcases with seaweed?
Dry it out first so you can carry back as much as possible. Yeah.
Here's a great question. If you're using seaweed when you're composting, so this must be somebody who's close to the coast, guys. So catch this guy. He's already on it. He said, when using seaweed for composting, will we be using it as greens or browns? Because when they're washed ashore, sometimes they're coming up green and then they dry off. Sometimes they're already brown. So what would they be used as in composting? Good question. I want to know.
I think it would, I mean, I don't think I wouldn't call it a brown like a wood. I also don't know. I mean, personally, what I do with it is I would mulch. I would lay it down in between my rows and on my land to get my land covered. I personally don't use compost. I don't believe in making compost. I don't want to be sacrilegious. I'm just saying.
Hey guys, we're going to ask Dan to leave us now. Okay. Okay, but tell us why.
My question is always, how does nature do it? And I don't see anywhere in nature where a bunch of organic matter is taken from all over the place and piled up and turned over and then spread back out. What I see happen in nature is organic matter gets laid on the ground and then is slowly digested by the earth. So you can call it composting if you want. I call it, you make cold composting. So what happens is, what I do on my farm is I keep my soil covered as much as possible with hay or with straw. I would definitely use seaweed if I had it. And what my experience is when I keep my soil covered, it keeps the water in, it feeds the soil life, it feeds the earthworms, and then I get tons and tons and tons of earthworm castings. So if I have 20 earthworms per square yard, that'll turn into 20 tons of earthworm castings per acre. So I'm thinking about, keeping an environment where I can have earthworm castings manufactured by life on my land, which is way more efficient than taking stuff, piling it up, turning it over, and spreading it. So for me, as little work as possible and as natural as possible.
So guys, you know how Dan farms by now, right? He's in a hammock on the beach. He just lets nature take his course.
I've got a pond in my property and I do like to take naps. But yeah, my idea is work 20 hours a week, pay your bills, and then you can play with your kids. Then you can take naps. Then you can do what I do, which is travel the world and speak, or do whatever else you want to do with your life. You shouldn't have to work all the time just to pay a living. And if you work with nature, it's more productive and it costs less, so it's possible.
So just in defense of compost.
I'm not opposed to compost. I'm just saying it's not efficient.
Okay, but where I think compost comes in really useful is especially where you have really denuded and microbially bare soils and you don't have a lot of organic matter. So with our climate the way it is at the moment, with our rains the way they are, if you don't have enough matter to mulch your ground and you've got a crop growing, you can make with a small amount of compost a really good microbially rich and secondary metabolite rich compost that you can then use to start inoculating and start the process, keeping in mind all the other regen things like you're saying, keep a canopy, keep living roots, and then you're going to end up getting a lot more organic matter anyway because more stuff is growing. But if you're coming from a place, because our agricultural systems here, Dan, are, and what we do typically is the first thing we do is we clear the land completely. We clear it and we wait for the rain and we let it dry. It literally
dumb.
just dries as we wait for the rain.
That's there's the first mistake.
Exactly.
What you should do is plant cover crops.
Exactly. So for the regen students and all of those that are coming into this space now, it's almost like a relearning of how we traditionally we do our agriculture here. And our agriculture is led very much by big pharma. So, the agro dealers are the educators. When farmers have problems with pests and diseases, they go to these guys and they say, put this on it, put that on it, do this with it. And nobody takes responsibility. And there's a massive lack of knowledge, which is why we're doing what we're doing, why we're doing these courses, to make sure that this information gets out. But where your land is coming from a terrible state of affairs, and you want to quickly try and get it into order, I think there is a good argument to use your compost to get yourself to that point where you can say, now I don't need to do that anymore. I've got enough mulch. I'm mulching my ground. The biology is in there. But we're coming from a place of no biology. Literally, I did a soil sample the other day. Looking at it, it was so microbially, what's the word?
Efficient.
Yeah, there was nothing else in there, and I was just like, and of course, when I looked at it, when I did some other tests on it, the EC was all over the show. It was terrible, and I'm just like, how do you grow stuff in this? You've got to turn it around. Anyway.
And so the first mistake is to clear the land off.
Yeah.
Which takes work, right? So do less work. Don't clear the land off. If you could plant some cover crops then, and they would start growing, that would be feeding the soil life. And if you're clearing the land off, and then where are you getting the material to build your compost pile in the first place? So
yeah,
we'll have a long conversation about this in March, and we'll go back and forth. I look forward to the conversation.
Very good.
Yeah.
Okay, so
using compost as an inoculant is a beautiful thing and a wonderful thing. Inoculating your soil is great. I don't disagree with that. I'm not opposed to compost. I'm just saying I don't.
You don't compost. Dan's going to write a book, guys, and it's going to be called How to Farm by Doing Nothing. You should.
How does nature do it? How does nature do it? The first question is, what is nature's way? Where in nature do you see bare soil? Nature is not flourishing where soil is bare. You have to ask the question, listen to the person who's selling you things, or ask nature what her way is. You have to understand who is the person to be listening to. Yeah. That's the first thing, is what is nature's way? And if anything ever disagrees with nature's way,
I often say that when somebody says to me they've made a compost tea and they put manure in water and let it just bubble away and it's stinky and smelly and then go spray that on crops, I'm like, where the hell does that ever happen in nature? It's almost like it's so disrespectful to the plants, spraying stinky stuff on them. What do they think? Not that they can think. Okay, so I'm going to go back to one of my questions.
Very sentient. Plants definitely are very aware.
Let's see. We've actually covered most of the questions that I had here just in conversation. Okay, yeah. What role does crop diversity play in enhancing the mineral profile of soils?
Massive. Where
do you start?
I think you talked about Christine Jones in your introduction. You had talked about Christine Jones. Did you talk about quorum sensing?
No, but you can do that.
So anybody who has a little bit of time, look up quorum sensing on YouTube and Christine Jones. And there's an immense amount of extraordinarily appropriate information here. Again, to the point of how does nature do it? Nature does not do monocultures. Nature does polycultures. And it seems, I think from her research, that only when you've got 12 or more different species of plants growing together, do you get that functional dynamic where you have, drought resilience and flood resilience, and effectively each family of plants, each species has its own microbiome. And so when you have, like, the chicken has a microbiome, and the pig has a microbiome, and the goat has a microbiome, and the cow has a microbiome, they each have a different gut. They each have different microbes in their gut. So a corn plant has a microbiome, and a bean plant has a microbiome, and a tomato plant has a microbiome. And so when you have lots of different species of plants growing together, then you have a broad spectrum of microbes in the soil. And it's that diversity of plants with their diversity of microbes that when that kicks into gear, you get much, much, much greater bioavailability of nutrients. I would say that you have this thing called transmutation, which occurs, which is effectively alchemy, as in, atomic weight 28 plus atomic weight 12 equals atomic weight 40, which we in the Western scientific perspective say is impossible, except there are Western rational scientific, researchers who've published papers proving that it happens. So actually, it seems like a healthy microbiome can manufacture the minerals you need from the parent material.
That's crazy, isn't it?
They will create the boron from other things if you have that diversity of life there. So actually, one of the most powerful things you can do is establish as broad a spectrum of species of plants in your growing area as possible and maintain them as much as possible. And that's what nature does. And nature does not use fertilizer. She does not use insecticides. She does not use fungicides. You don't have, all these insects coming and taking out plants. You don't have diseases taking out plants. In nature, things somehow magically work. And actually, we can learn a lot by seeing how much we can model nature. And the science is there to explain how it works. So, yeah, and biodiversity is massively relevant and valuable. And you can think about, I think when I was spending time in India 20 years ago, I was working with this lady called Vandana Shiva, and she has an organization called Navdanya. And Navdanya means 9 seeds. And I don't know what the traditional wisdom is in Africa. I haven't been there enough to learn, but a lot of cultures would grow multiple families of plants together. They would plant those seeds together, and those plants would grow and they'd climb over each other. And it doesn't work for monoculture. It doesn't work if you got big tractors and sort of industrial machines. But at a human scale, you can actually get much greater productivity if you grow these plants together. So put your watermelons in with your corn, in with your beans, in with your, I don't know what all.
So Dan, I'm going to
tomatoes
ask
and cucumbers.
Yeah, I'm going to ask you the question that I'm always asked. Okay, and by the way, just the way you're speaking just now, last weekend I was listening to a farmer up in Narok called Mr. Yusuf. He's actually in this chat. Hi, Yusuf. He speaks like you. It's all about nature. And it's really, really great to work with a farmer who gets it, who you're not trying to say, hey, like this. He's already like, okay, I get it. What do I need to do? Because this is the way it should be. This is the way I'm made. This is the way I think. But how do I actually do it? So a big question that comes out to, a question that I'm often asked is, and it's obviously coming from the anti-organic, the conventional, whatever it is, how is this going to feed the world? Okay, now not long ago,
really, really well.
Exactly, I should answer that. Well, you know what I
better than any other way.
Yeah, exactly. What I normally say is, well, we're not doing a good job with the way that we're producing now. So, what we can clearly say is that conventional farming isn't feeding the world, because look at the state of everything, right?
I think according to the UN, something like 70% of the world's food is produced by smallholders.
Exactly. I often say that about Kenya when we're with issues. I'm like, why doesn't something start?
Reality now.
Yeah.
It's smallholders that are feeding the world. It's not big chemical farmers that are feeding the world. It's smallholders and small plots feeding the world.
Exactly.
It's indigenous cultural traditional wisdom that was what caused the land to be healthy and vibrant. It's the tractors and the monoculture and the chemicals that is causing the climate to go haywire. It's the application of this industrial model that is foundational in the problems. And for some reason, we're taught to trust these people that are abusing the land and abusing us. And, colonization. It's colonization. It's not appropriate. We need to free our minds.
Yeah. You
Mother
mentioned
Earth should be our teacher.
yeah. You mentioned Vandana, and about 2 months ago we had a webinar with her.
Yeah.
And that the exact words she used. The exact words she used. It's colonization of our food systems, and it's, you know,
Our
it's
minds. For
crazy.
some reason, we think we should trust the people selling us chemicals.
You know,
We
or
should
trust.
trust our indigenous cultural traditional wisdom that worked for thousands and thousands of years.
Exactly. And should we trust the supermarkets, or the supermarkets just, I say supermarkets are just a human feedlot. They're people producing food at the lowest cost possible, which means the lowest nutrient possible. And we
Which
go
makes
in
it
there.
not food, which makes it junk,
Exactly.
which makes it junk.
Yeah.
There's food and there's junk. You can't have junk food. That's like living dead. You either have food or you have junk.
Yeah.
And people who are trying to sell you things are trying
Yeah.
to sell you things. They aren't trying to empower you. They're trying to sell you things.
Exactly.
Think about the incentive of the person you're talking to. Are they trying to empower you, or are they trying to profit off of you? You can't be so
Exactly.
trusting of people all the time. This is one of the biggest issues, is just trusting people. A good, traditional, humble person from nature will trust everyone because they're trustworthy themselves, and they would assume that everyone else is trustworthy. But the colonized people are not trustworthy. The people
Yeah.
trying to profit off of you, you can't trust them.
Yeah, absolutely. And I recall you saying during one of your conferences that one of the reasons you don't, and it's one of the reasons actually that we as iCow try and stay very, we're very, very selective about the people that we will partner with, because if their ethos don't align with ours, we don't want to be, we have so much value in the trust that we get from the thousands, the millions of farmers actually that use the iCow products across East Africa, that when you look at this space, a lot of the revenue models are to work with input providers or as a marketing arm for input providers, and that just completely erodes your trust, erodes your brand, erodes your ethos, et cetera, et cetera.
Yep.
It's, I recall you saying the same thing about where you would actually accept money from your business. Very few and far between because of the same reasons.
I mean, I would love to have the money to do all the research we want to accomplish. And if I was willing to work with people that could control the data we collected, I could have had the money a long time ago.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
I insist on the data we collect being freely available to everyone on the planet. And that means anybody who wants to invest can't control it, and so they don't invest.
Yeah.
Only
So
people
here's
who want
a
to
question
support
for
the
you.
greatest good. Yeah.
Here's another question for you. ChatGPT, using AI to fix problems in agriculture. What are your views?
I'd have to have more of a context. I'm completely technologically rudimentary.
Okay.
I think it's entirely possible for AI to be valuable, but I think, yeah,
It
I don't
depends.
know.
Doesn't it? Yeah, I think that it could be as well, but I'm worried about who's behind it, because
Who's
if it's
doing it,
AI,
and what's their incentive, and
yeah,
what's the end conclusion?
exactly.
If AI is reading all of the chemical farming textbooks,
Of course it is.
well, then it's going to come out with a recommendation based on
And
the things that
and
chemical farming textbooks tell us. If it's
exactly.
reading all the indigenous cultural wisdom and taking all the insights from indigenous cultural wisdom and digesting that, then I'd be totally interested.
Yeah.
But
And
who's guiding the AI who's telling the AI what to read? That's the most important question.
yeah, and I guess the AI is going to be picking up the mass information to come to those algorithms and things and the reason that it's spitting stuff out. But if there is not enough of a regen conversation in the body of content that's out there, then it will come out, it will spit out conventional
Why
stuff.
would we want to go to AI in the first place? Give me a reason. Give me a
Okay.
reason to go to AI in the first place, because we have people who know better, and we only really learn through our relationship with our land.
Yeah, so there will be a lot of reasons, and a lot of reasons in the future. As the young people come into doing agriculture, that's where they're going to go. They're going to go to
Not
ChatGPT, or
necessarily.
Gemini, or any of those
They
things.
could go and volunteer on a farm and learn from elders.
But they don't, and they won't.
Anybody who wants to go and look at screens and think they can learn the important things about life from screens and not from humans you know?
Yeah, I think that unfortunately the reality is with gadgets and gizmos and AI and the way the IT world is working, is it is going to be pulled in that direction. And I think that there needs to be a massive body of regenerative stuff out there so that it can be picked by the, by people. Because otherwise, I mean, even today, if you go and search and say, how do you grow X, Y, and Z, and what nutrients do I need? It's not going to give you a regenerative option. It's going to throw at you X, Y, the chemical option.
The mistake is asking the machine. The first mistake is asking the machine instead of asking a wise elder.
There are not enough wise elders, and there are more youth with machines. There are more youth.
And what's happening is people are getting sick and they're dying because they're losing touch with nature. If the farther away from nature you get, the more you die, because nature, it's the way of nature is if you are in harmony, you flourish and you reproduce. And if you're out of harmony, you die. Yeah. It's not good or bad, right or wrong. It's just the fact of the way the world works. So people will go away from nature and they'll begin to experience suffering and disease. And maybe they'll continue in that trajectory and die, or maybe they'll turn back towards nature. I don't see any other way.
Exactly. Yeah. And the crazy thing is, we hope that turning back is not, I mean, we know that it's happening because people are getting desperate. So if we look at 2 or 3 of the high ag potential areas in Kenya, so Kiambu, Murang'a, Meru, even Nyeri, those places apparently have the highest cancer incidences as well in the entire country.
I think that definition of high ag potential is coming from places that are flat where they can be using lots of machinery and chemicals. And I would say the potential for agriculture to be functioning highly is everywhere, that all land can be remarkably productive if we begin to treat it well. And the model of assuming tractor, massive scale agriculture is the definition of high productivity is part of the colonized mindset.
Yeah.
Sorry, being too strong.
No, don't worry. I know we've got you enraged.
I'm not enraged. I'm just passionate, and sometimes the passion is too strong. So I hope I'm not coming across too strongly. Yeah.
Okay, so we are close to the end of our session today. Now I'm going to go to the audience and I'm going to ask you if you would like to personally have you have a question that you would like to ask Dan. We will take 3 questions now. And whilst you're putting your hands up, we're also, and James is organizing the whoever's got their hands up. I would just like to tell us all a little bit about what's happening tomorrow, because some of you have actually asked questions that I have not answered. Oh, look at that. Somebody said, thanks, Elder Dan. You're being considered an elder here, by the way. So
I'll accept that with great honor and appreciation. I am almost 50 years old. I'm 47. I'm older than some people, so yeah.
Have to appreciate that
not
you
a
come
spring
out
chicken anymore.
and do this proper ceremonies. Tomorrow's session, and like I said, it does touch on some of the content or some of the questions that you've been asking today, and it goes that step further from nutrients and minerals into nutrients. So you've been asking, well, how do those minerals become nutrients? And what about minerals, nutrients, and health? And can Dan tell us a little bit about that? And that's what tomorrow's session is going to be about. We've got a really, really great session for you all tomorrow. So I hope you're all going to show up. Try and show up on time. We've got 2 speakers tomorrow. We have one of our own students in the group who's going to be joining us. That's Delia Sterling. So big shout out to Delia. Looking forward to your chat tomorrow, to your time here. And we're going to be talking about nutrient density. Dan will be showing us some of his data that he has got from some tests that they've been doing. I mean, he hasn't mentioned very much the tools that he's been developing, and we hopefully will go through that tomorrow, the reasons why, what they are, how long it's taking him. I mean, he really is an absolutely passionate pioneer in this space, and he has been at it, hanging in there through thick and thin to get these devices out so that we can all make the right choices. So I can see 3 hands up already. We've got Michael, we've got somebody whose name I can't read, 2 hearts and what looks like little cow horns, which is very cute, and the M-Pesa Academy. So let's go in that order. Michael, let's spotlight Michael, give him his camera we have already. Let's spotlight Michael, bring him down onto the floor and give him his audio. Where is Michael? Hi, Michael.
Yes.
Hi,
Hi.
good to see you. There we are. How are you?
Fine.
How are you?
Great.
I've really enjoyed today's session. I've gotten to know that the dust from the quarry is really good for our soil. So I'm really I come from an area where I can access the dust from quarry, but we've been using it just for building. In fact, you will see heaps of them beside the road, the way Sue was saying. Thank you for that. And I'm really going to try that to spread it in a small piece of land. I see the difference. So if it works, then I'll spread it big
Perfect.
enough. Thank you.
Fabulous. Fabulous. And thank you for your comment. And do keep us updated in the WhatsApp later in our group along your journey and tell us how it goes.
Okay, thank you.
Perfect. So next we had, there was somebody else, but I see that their hand is no longer up. The lovely little cow horn thingy.
Mike from Kenya says, I think.
Ah, there we are. There we are. Oh, it's Mike from Kenya. Okay, there we go. Let's, where are you? You've gone. Where'd he go? Bring him back. So Mike from Kenya, are you having problems with your, he's disappeared. Okay, well, when he comes back, we'll bring him back. Let's go to the M-Pesa Foundation Academy. This is a group of students in an academy up in Thika. Let's put the camera on and give you the microphone. Let's come on down on the floor. You have to start your video.
Hello.
Hi.
Okay, hi.
How are you?
I'm fine. I'm Mixella from the M-Pesa Foundation Academy. And I
Nice.
was asking, okay, nice to meet you too. So my question is, you've talked about using ChatGPT, right? But I found that sometimes it's hard to get some expert who knows such things and get to ask them. And the only thing which you can be near to ask is only your gadget. So you can only ask ChatGPT. As you had said also, you can go in YouTube, and when you're trying to search something, you're asking, it's not giving you adequate information of what you want. And also, yeah, we don't know what's behind ChatGPT, who is behind it, who is behind the AI. But sometimes I used to find, like, sometimes, yes, it can give you incorrect answers. But what if you just argue? Like, sometimes I used even to argue with it. I say, this is not correct. I think this should be like this. What do you think? Then it will start, like, you start an discussions, like a discussion. So how do you find it? Yeah,
Okay.
that was my question.
Thank you for that. And I will just quickly say something before Dan answers. So Dan, the M-Pesa Foundation Academy is an academy that is put together by the M-Pesa Foundation. It's up in Thika. There are 97 students, a girl and a boy from every county in Kenya, who get scholarships to come to this academy. It's an Apple-enabled academy. It's a fantastic learning center. This group joined and they have been following in my class, which is really great. They're the youngest students that we have. And yeah, so over to you with your answer, Dan.
Yeah, well, I mean, and when I'm in country in March, if there were a place where I might be able to come and speak, I'd be happy to.
Fantastic.
I don't quite know what the schedule is and where everything is, but I am looking forward very much to coming to Kenya and having an opportunity to meet people in person and see things and learn myself and share. Yeah, well, I guess, I mean, I'm 47, I'm almost 50. And so I remember when the VCR came in. I remember, you know, it was long before the internet when I was in college and I finished college, and you didn't have to have an email account. I mean, most people didn't necessarily have computers. We certainly didn't have cell phones. So I guess I'm older now, and I don't naturally think to ask the computer. In fact, I, on principle, never ask Google or a computer anything. I mean, maybe I'm a bit dogmatic and recalcitrant and resistant, but my thought is I should learn and I should know and I want to ask humans and learn from humans. But certainly there is a lot of information on the internet, and a lot of it is valuable. I will say that I'm not sure if that was a big emergency vehicle just went back behind me. We, as our organization, the Bionutrient Food Association, we have a YouTube channel, and what we have been doing for the past almost 15 years is collecting recordings from the people that we consider to be elders. So every single person who's ever spoken at our conference, their presentation has been recorded and is on our YouTube channel. And that is all freely available. And that is something that I have considered to be an extraordinarily important thing. And one thing I should do with the privilege that I have, something that I, came to me very deeply when I was, documenting farmer suicides in South India 20 years ago, and was realizing that all the insight and wisdom that's out there was not available to these smallholder farmers. And so part of what I've been working to do is to collate, curate, digest, and be able to make freely available to all growers on all continents this information and wisdom from the various elders. I think the one thing I would say is to expect to get the best answer immediately is maybe, how do I say it? I think, the right answer sometimes takes a level of depth and learning, and it's an iterative process. And so, we do have hundreds of hours of recordings, and sometimes the process of going through and listening to elders and listening to integrated wisdom is a process by which your own perspective can be deepened. Maybe that's too long and slow for the younger generation, but yeah, I want to make sure to say and hopefully have that information conveyed, that we have an NGO that, we've been doing everything we can to collect as much insight and wisdom as possible and make it free and available. Yeah, and there's many ways to the top of the mountain. I'm certainly curious about this concept of arguing with ChatGPT. I don't know how to download an app. I don't engage in online transactions. I'm really quite rudimentary in my electronic interaction. So I don't know how to make a point. So somebody says, "Where are you?" I don't know how to make my phone have a spot where I can tell someone where I am. So we all have our different strengths and weaknesses. I'm of the opinion that talking to people, listening to the land, experimenting, I think the real answers are going to come from the land. And whatever ChatGPT tells you to do, I would say experiment by doing it on the land and seeing what results you get, because the real answer is from the land. Nature is the one that has the real answer. And if ChatGPT can help you get there, that's wonderful. Books can help you get there, talking to people, YouTube can help you get there. But the real answer is nature's opinion, and getting to the point where you can be having that conversation with nature, I think, is the real objective. Imagine you were talking to nature the way you feel comfortable talking to ChatGPT. Imagine being able to talk to nature that way and develop that capacity for communication.
Yeah, and that's really and really being intentional in your observance as well, sitting and really looking and realizing and seeing and sensing and feeling.
Actually having conversation. I think the reality is we are wired with the capacity to communicate directly. Our traditional indigenous elders talk about humans' ability to communicate with plants, to communicate with animals from a deep level. And I would say that's part of what we should be considering as our full potential and really the highest objective of where we're aiming for.
Yeah, and I would add to that. I would add to that, Dan, or maybe summarize it.
Your mind.
Take your information from several sources and then make your logical conclusion based on what is right for the ecology around you, etc., rather than just taking information from the fastest source, which is, unfortunately, we are in that very fast world and communication is very fast and we almost believe everything we say. There's so much fake news because it just spreads like wildfire because people don't stop to think about whether these things are actually true or could be whatever. The other day, I got a photograph of a baby leopard that had been killed. We have a leopard around in our area and we're all being told not to walk around at night because it's been sighted. And then there was a a picture of a baby leopard that had died. And somebody said, oh, somebody's dog's got the baby cub and the mother is around. And I just took that photograph and I put it into Google Lens and it showed me the same photograph taken 8 years ago somewhere else. And straight away I knew that's fake news. So learn to fact check using those tools, not just to absorb the knowledge that comes through them.
I just don't go online. I keep it really simple. I don't have social media. I don't bother myself. Humans have lived for a very long time without getting information from screens. And maybe we were doing better back then.
It's true. It's true. Thank you guys from M-Pesa. And please do talk to your headmaster. And when Dan comes out, we'll bring him over to speak at the school. Wonderful. So our last attendee who is going to have a chance to ask questions because his hand has been up before he goes to the beach, because he's off to Kwale to the beach soon to collect some seaweed and everything, is Ahmed Bridir. Ahmed, karibu. Your microphone's off.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Hi guys. Hi Sue, hi Dan, everyone. This has really been such an amazing session. I'm just blown away. And firstly, on the fact that I can re-mineralize my soil, number one.
Yes.
And then number two, everything I need is free and local and available, from the wood ash to the raw salt. And so I'm gonna really do a test, a trial of using the rock dust, using the sea salt. After I process it, I've written down everything, and if I can get the granite dust as well. How long does it take to notice the changes, Dan? Is this something that you can use on put the cover crop in there, put the everything in there, and do it and see immediate changes, or do you have to get the microbiology and everything working first? That's really my question there.
Very good question, and very good question. Yeah. So when I teach my course, I teach that there's 5 things that must be present for life to function well, and minerals is just one of them. So it's a critically important piece, but there must be food for the life in the soil, that whether that's green leaves or mulch. There must be air in the soil for the microbes to breathe, otherwise they die of a lack of air. There must be water for the microbes to drink, otherwise they die from lack of thirst. And there must be microbes there themselves. So that's where the inoculation or the compost teas come in. So only when you have the minerals and the air and the water and the food and the microbes present will the system function. At any point in time, if there's no air or no water or no food or no minerals, life can't live. And so don't take me to be just saying add the minerals and transformation will happen. It has to be part of a living system. I do have this all conveyed in my 2-day course There's multiple versions online for free. Yeah, I mean, here in the Northern Hemisphere where it's getting to be fall and into winter, I tell people this is the perfect time of year. So people think about the end of the growing season as the fall, and then the spring is the beginning of the growing season. I don't know how it works in Kenya. I've not been there to understand your seasons and everything. But what I tell them is, if you put the minerals down and then you plant your cover crops in the fall, the act of the cover crops growing will be, they'll take the minerals, they'll digest them, and by spring, when you're ready to plant your crops, those minerals will be bioavailable. So it's not like fertilizer. It's not immediately soluble. It has to be digested by soil life. The higher the level of life in your soil, the faster it'll happen. So I hope that sort of answers your question.
Yeah, it does. It does. Thank you.
Yeah, everything is part of the process. Yeah.
Ahmed is actually not in Kenya. He's in Somaliland. So
Okay.
he's out on the Horn of Africa, which is really cool.
Sorry, I didn't understand. But yeah.
No, sorry. We'll take him.
Yeah. I'm happy to work with people everywhere. I'm not judgmental. Yeah. Exactly. You're a human who's got an open heart. Let's talk together. Yeah.
Exactly. And a little bit about our seasons. We're really, really lucky because we do have rainy seasons, but we don't have those harsh winters and things that really cut off seasons. We don't have winter, fall, etc., etc. We've got long and short rains, and things can grow literally for almost 11 months of the year.
Wonderful.
So, yeah. Wonderful. Dan, how can we thank you enough, man? This has just been really, really great. And I'm sure you must be starving because I haven't seen you eat or drink anything, and you came running in from.
I've got water right here. I've almost done with my water. It's almost empty. Yeah.
Okay.
There you go. Log on. Yeah.
So when we end our class, what we normally do is we all put our microphones on and our cameras on. So that's to tech. It's time to do that so that we can all personally say thank you to Dan and wave at Dan, and he can see all these faces from wherever. So you can take Dan and I off spotlight so that everybody can be seen. Please, guys, put your cameras on.
Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for the information.
Thank you. Good night.
Thank you all very, very much. It's been wonderful.
Good night. Good night. Thank you.